This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. In January 2016, Laura Bingham began an attempt to cycle across South America. Nothing out of the ordinary for a 23-year-old looking for adventure, except that she planned to do it without any money. With only the equipment she could fit in her panniers, she cycled 7,000 kilometers from the Pacific coast of Ecuador through Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina until reaching the Atlantic Ocean at Buenos Aires. She got a glimpse of life without financial security and learned that strangers aren't always kind and welcoming. During her journey, Laura was raising money and awareness for Operation South America, a charity that looks after homeless or abused young women in Paraguay. You can learn more about Laura at her website, laurabingham.org. Laura Bingham, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I wanted to get a little bit into your background of how you ended up living in Mexico and what you were doing there.
I actually, when I was in London, I met a Mexican chap and he said that I should come to Mexico. And I was thinking, yeah, okay, at some point in my life, I'm sure I'll go. But then a friend of mine and I went to Florida, and we lived in Florida for a winter doing polo and jumping. It seemed so close to Mexico that I thought, I can't not go. I'm this close. So I contacted him, did my TEFL course in teaching English as a foreign language, and went there. And within 3 days, I had an apartment and a job teaching English. And then through a chap that I got to know in a cafe, who owned a cafe, he was doing a job conserving jaguars for the Mexican government. And he said, you're really, really cool. I really like your vibe type thing. Do you want to come and help me do some of this jaguar conservation? So then I ended up going with him to West Mexico to do a bit of jaguar conservation. And that's what sort of really sparked that. And then sailing back to England from Orlando really sparked this adventurous streak in me.
How did you enjoy doing the teaching of English?
I now have a lot more respect for my teachers at school. I didn't realize how hard it was until you've got a group of sort of 30 people in front of you not doing their homework, not taking it seriously. And it really taught me that if you want to learn, it's the responsibility of yourself, not the responsibility of the teacher to teach you. They can give you the knowledge, but if you're not willing to take it on and actually apply it, there's just no point. So afterwards, I had a lot of respect for my teachers and realized that teaching was not something that I wanted to do for more than 4 months in Mexico.
I don't want to get too deep into the English language questioning, but just one out of curiosity, how did you feel that the TEFL course prepared you?
It prepared me as best as it could in theory, but always when you go sort of from theory to practicality, there's always a huge shift. So I think it prepared me as best as it could, and then the rest was down to me and being confident in front of a group of people. I think maybe it could have gone into more the disciplinary side of teaching and what you can do to not control a group, but what you can do to help manage a group. It taught you the best ways of teaching, but it didn't really teach me the best ways of disciplining a group.
How did this idea for the South American journey come about?
I sailed back from Orlando, so I flew up to Mexico and then sailed from Orlando to England. And then when I got back, everyone was so inspired by what I'd done, and the reaction I got was so wonderful that I thought, oh God, I could do something bigger and better and crazier and hopefully inspire more people. And I really had a huge passion for this sort of adventure type stuff. So then I decided that I would cycle around the world and try and hold the record for that. Currently, it's being held by a woman called Juliana Burnham at 3 months, or just over 3 months or something. And I thought, oh yeah, I could do that. I could do it quicker than her. And then I realized that I was about the journey, not about the race. So then I homed in specifically on South America because I'd fallen in love with Mexico and I'd fallen in love with that South American culture that I wanted to focus on South America. And plus I already spoke Spanish. So that was a huge hurdle out of the way already. And then I realized that a lot of people cycle South America, and it's quite a thing to do on a gap year. So I wanted to make it a bit different and try and gain understanding of how different people live and put myself out of my comfort zone. So then I decided to do it without any money. But then I realized that I could possibly be viewed as taking money from already poor people. And being in a first world country, I realized that that could be quite controversial, that could look a bit bad. So then I started looking for ways that I could give back. And I realized realistically, going back to every single person that helped me was a little bit unrealistic. And actually me getting around to doing that it was very easy for that not to happen. So then I decided to hone in on a charity specifically that works with people that don't have enough money, and a South American-based charity. And then I found Operation South America. And they are a South American-based charity. It focuses on females, and me being female in South America, it fit very well. And they look at giving food and shelter to young women that don't have, their parents don't have enough money to look after them, or they're abused. Or when I saw the website for that charity, it just really hit my heart, and I just knew that that was the one I wanted to work with.
Just so that I understand this, then, did you decide to do it with money, or did you stick to your plan of not doing it with money?
Oh no, I never did it with money. I never spent any money. No, 100% without money, and it was quite traumatizing.
Well, that gets me back to a question that I had about the fears going into this. Was money the biggest fear that you had, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was being hungry. No one likes to be hungry, but the hardest thing was being hungry without knowing when food would come. So at home, you go out and you're hungry and you're like, oh, I can't wait to get back home and have a nice big dinner, or I'll just run to the shop and grab a sandwich. Without that knowledge, that comforting knowledge to your hunger, it's so difficult. When your stomach is cramping with hunger and you just don't know when that food is going to come, and you're just crying because you're praying that someone will take pity on you and fill your stomach, it's quite testing. But I was obviously very scared as well to do the cycling, because I was having to cross the Andes 3 times and go through the desert and go through the Amazon and various big cities. So the cycling in itself was quite scary, because I'm not a hugely experienced cyclist. So the Andes, going through, crossing a mountain range 3 times was quite scary. But I'd say the biggest fear was being rejected and being hungry without knowing when the next meal would come.
In terms of being an inexperienced cyclist, what did you do to prepare yourself, and kind of how long did you start, before you left, did you start preparing?
I spoke to a few cyclists, and I spoke to a physio, and they said not to exhaust myself before I go, to make sure I'm nicely rested before I go. And a lot of people that have done tours said not to put too much stress on being super cycling fit, because when you're going on a tour like this, you'll get fit as you go along. So I went off that basis. I did a few 100-milers around England and camped, so I knew what it was like to cycle and then camp and then cycle. But other than that, I didn't do that much training or preparation, just a lot of mental preparation to tell myself that I could do it. And I listened to a lot of motivational videos. There's a YouTube video called Motivational Madness, and I'm sort of addicted to that channel because I find so much strength within their videos.
Tell me about your bike.
It's a Genesis Quad 30, and it's an incredible thing. I had someone with me predominantly throughout the trip, but they were on a sort of a rotation. So I had someone for the first 2 months, then I went alone for 2 weeks, and then I had my fiance for a month, a friend for 2 weeks, my sister for a month, and then my other sister for a month. So the other bike got hit by a car twice. The people on the bikes were fine, almost, the second one. But the bike got run over and got snapped in half in 2 different places and bent. And we had a crowbar, and we were pulling it back together and welding it back together. And then it still crossed the Andes and cycled another 4,000 kilometers. So it's an incredible, resilient bike. And I can't believe it made it, considering it got hit twice. And my bike, well, the bikes are this really, really amazing hybrid between like a fat bike and a road bike. So they're slightly lighter than a sort of a touring fat bike, but they're a lot sturdier and a bit heavier, and they're more resilient than just a normal road bike. And I had Schwalbe Marathon Plus tires, and they're these huge, thick things that just don't get punctures. So if anyone is going on a tour, a cycling tour, I'd definitely say to take the Schwalbe Marathon Plus tires, because you just don't get punctures with them. And to take a Quad of Fur by Genesis, because they're really, really resilient, robust bikes.
Why did you have a trailer?
Oh my God, don't even ask me that. I don't know. It was the worst idea, because we were going without any money. So I had to really prepare for everything and anything. So I had to take enough like paracetamol for the entire trip. I had to take enough water filters for the entire trip. I had to take any first aid things I thought I might need, and just plenty of stuff, because I couldn't rebuy it and I couldn't buy new things when and if I needed it. I sort of ended up having to carry a lot more than what I should have. After about 2 months, we whittled it down so that we didn't need the trailer, and we got rid of them. And I took extra clothes, like loads of extra clothes, to give to people as presents and to trade and say thank you to people that were poor and had tried to help us. Well, after a couple of months, I'd given enough away that we could get rid of the trailer. And thank God, because it just made cycling so much more enjoyable. Because the less weight you have cycling, the more enjoyable it is. And I've really, really learnt that lesson. And I would suggest to anyone, do not take a trailer. Do not.
What was that first word you said? I didn't catch it. Paracetamol?
Paracetamol.
Yeah, what is that?
It's like Advil? Is that what you guys call it?
Like aspirin, or?
Yeah, like aspirin. But within aspirin, you have sort of it's a combination of paracetamol and like loads of other type of drugs. But paracetamol blocks your synapses, so you have synapses within your body, and paracetamol goes in between them, and it stops the signals going from your body to your brain to tell you that you're in pain. So it's not like ibuprofen that's an inflammatory. It's just something that stops your body from realizing that it's in pain. It's a really, really basic, like 22p a pack drug. We kind of live off it here in England.
So you mentioned some of the people that you cycled with. The first one was a guy named Cho.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about him and what was his role?
Okay, well, I don't know if you know who Ed Stafford is, but he's my fiancé, and he was the first man to walk the Amazon. It took him 2.5 years. And for 2 years of that, a man called Cho walked with him and accompanied him. So when Ed spoke to Ranulph Fiennes and asked if he would become a patron on my expedition, he said yes, but I think you're being blind to the dangers out there, and I think she should take someone with her. And because Cho was so reliable for Ed, he asked Cho if he wouldn't mind coming with me. He said yes. So he is a Peruvian jungle guide, and he cycled with me for the first 2 months from Ecuador into Lima.
So my understanding is that, did you and Cho have some sort of falling out, or what happened that he left the expedition and you ended up having to recruit some other riders?
Because Cho and Ed were both male, they didn't really have this masculine, feminine sort of macho culture going on. They were quite equal. So Cho was in my opinion, it was very easy for him to accept that Ed was the boss. He was the man leading the expedition, and he was a lot younger at that time. Whereas I think for him, having a younger female come in and lead sort of an expedition, I think it was quite difficult for him because of that whole macho South American culture. And there were a lot of cultural differences and dynamics that just weren't working between us. And then we ended up having an argument, and we agreed that it would be best if he went back home and I continued on alone. I don't regret that decision at all, because the relationship just wasn't working between the two of us. I'm very thankful that I then went on alone and got other people to come out, because afterwards the expedition became so much more enjoyable. And especially because with Cho, we were speaking Spanish all the time, and my brain wasn't having a respite where it could just speak English and just chat nonsense and make jokes. When you're speaking a different language, you've always got to think about what you're going to say, what's the easiest way of saying it. Your brain is constantly working, and when your body is so tired, the last thing I wanted was to tire my brain as well. So it became a lot more enjoyable when I had English speaking people with me.
When you recruited some new companions, some new teammates, did you have to say to them, hey, look, you have to do this without any money?
Yeah, that was the rule. The complete and utter rule is that if they were coming into the expedition, they had to live like I was, with no money. I know that Ed found that very difficult. He hates putting himself on other people, even in England, anywhere. He's very independent and he hates asking for help. So for him, because he speaks Spanish as well, for him to then have to go and ask for things, it really, really put him out of his comfort zone, and he couldn't do it for the first few weeks. But then he sort of wanted to help feed me and look after me, so then he sort of got used to it. Unfortunately, the 3 females that then followed him, Ness, Claire and Sarah, they didn't speak Spanish. For them, it wasn't as difficult because it was completely down to me to get food and to create these relationships which gave us places to sleep and stuff. So for them, it wasn't too hard. They weren't put under too much stress, but they did, unfortunately, suffer the consequences of not being able to go and buy chocolate or biscuits when they wanted to, and they couldn't go and pay for a hotel if they wanted a bed and a shower. So they were limited in what they were able to have, but they didn't have to do any asking or talking.
I'm going to read this quote that I pulled off your blog. It says, when you're not spending any money, you have to be open to eating anything. Guts, a half-dead chicken I found on the side of the road, rotten fruit. So what exactly were you guys eating?
Well, that paints a very icky picture, but there were also amazing people that gave us loads of biscuits and yummy things as well. But there were a lot of times that we got gifted food and it was intestines. It was cooked intestines and liver and stuff. And a lot of people will be going oh, I couldn't do that. But guts aren't that bad. Intestines aren't that bad. If they're cooked and fried kind of like streaky bacon, they're actually quite nice and crispy. But having a pile of sort of fried intestines on a plate, I had to sort of hold my stomach back, and I didn't want to be ungrateful and go, I'm hungry, but I don't want these guts. I don't want these intestines. Give me something else. I wasn't in a position where I could demand different types of food. I had to eat what was put in front of me. And some very lovely people did serve me up some intestines. And out there, that's a good food for them. The half-dead chicken, I witnessed it getting hit because it ran towards me and then got frightened of me, ran towards the other side of the road. A car was coming, got frightened, ran towards me, saw that I was still coming, ran to the other side, by which time the car was half on top of it and broke its leg. So then I couldn't just leave this chicken with a broken leg on the side of the road, especially as I was looking for something to have for dinner. So I had to kill it by smashing its head with a rock, which was horrible. But the chicken was out of its misery and I had dinner. The rotten fruits, the culture out there, they tend to throw a lot of things on the side of the road. So there were big mounds of oranges that had gone off, and I would rummage through all of these oranges and there would be a few good ones in there. And I'd built up such a fear of rejection that a lot of the time I would go without the things that I wanted. So if there was a big fresh fruit stall, I'd be so scared of them saying no that I would just not eat fruit, or I would just live without the fruit and the nice things, So when there were these big piles of half-rotten fruit on the side of the road, I thought, oh, here I don't have to ask for it for free. I could probably find some. And yeah, I did find quite a few semi-rotten oranges, and you just eat around the rotten, the degrading bit, the icky bit, and you've got half a good orange there. And sometimes we found really nice oranges that were perfectly fine, that lasted a few days. So you just have to be open to finding things. And I ate a packet of crisps that had been outside in the sun for so long that they were supposed to be cheese puffs, but they tasted like white balls of plastic, but they were edible, so I ate them.
You mentioned the fear of rejection. Was that all in your mind, or did you really constantly get rejected all the time?
Oh God, yeah. In Ecuador, I got rejected so much that I built up this huge fear in my head, and I would almost prefer to be hungry than be rejected again. But it got to the point, like so many times, that the hunger got so unbearable that, yeah, when you're walking up a mountain pushing a bike and you get rejected 5 times and the houses are all a kilometer, well, like 1 to 3 kilometers away, it becomes very, very difficult because I'd ask a house for help, for food, for a place to sleep, to camp in their garden, and they'd say no, and then I'd have to push the bike another 3 kilometers in the rain. And then you just sort of presume that the next house is going to go, no, please leave, I don't want you. And then that happens 5 times, and it's just, you almost don't want to ask, and you just feel very insecure and vulnerable and like you're a burden, and just all of those bad emotions just get built up. They got built up inside of me that I became quite fearful of people. When I'd ask those people for something and they'd reject me, it would just add to that vulnerability, and it would add to that insecurity inside of me, and that feeling was growing and growing, that it just became a really depressive downward spiral.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the countries that you went through: Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina. What would you say were your biggest challenges for each of those countries?
The people and the terrain. The terrain within those countries, those were quite a big challenge, especially if it was the Andes or the desert. The Peruvian Amazon was an absolute delight to cycle through because it was flat, it was warm, there was loads of fruit and life all around me in abundance, and loads of streams to play in and to wash in. So the Peruvian Amazon was an absolute dream, and then the Bolivian salt flats were an absolute dream, but the Andes in Ecuador were a nightmare, the worst part of the whole trip. And then the Bolivian Andes were very difficult as well because there were a lot of dangerous roads, muddy tracks, steep uphills, and very extreme descents. The terrain in those countries were very difficult, whereas in Paraguay and Argentina it was very flat. So that was an absolute dream. And then the people, the challenges would be when the people started changing accents. So I'd have to accustom myself to a different accent when they spoke in different dialects. In Peru, they'd speak Quechua. In Bolivia, in Paraguay, they'd speak Guarani. So all of these different countries had slightly different dialects as well. And in the Andes, they'd mix their dialect in with Spanish. So the accents and different languages within each country was a bit challenging. And then being rejected in the first few countries was a challenge.
What did you enjoy most?
In Ecuador, the views were incredible. So if you want to go for a nice holiday, I'd probably say Ecuador, as long as you're in a car and with money, that would be wonderful. The views were incredible. Like I said, Peru, the Amazon, I'd love to go back there. Bolivia, the salt flats were one of the most impressive things I've seen in the world. It's just this huge white desert on like this huge scale. It's mind-boggling. And then Paraguay, the people were so warm and lovely. I always say that I've got like a little sunshine in me, and I lost that sunshine in Ecuador, and it didn't come back until I got to Paraguay. So I was in a very dark place in Ecuador. In Peru, it got a bit better. In Bolivia, it got a bit better. And then Paraguay, it went because the people are so lovely. They're so happy and generous and just smiley, and they really make you feel like it's a privilege and it's a treat to be there. And then Argentina, it's just meat and wine, and I had so much of it that it was just they have a very good food culture in Argentina and Paraguay.
I want to circle back to when we were talking about the bikes. You mentioned that one of the bikes was like run over twice, and then I know from reading through your blog that your fiance Ed was also like kind of sideswiped by a truck or whatever and had to go to the hospital. Can you tell me a little bit more about how these things happened?
Yeah, Cho, the first accident that happened on our descent from the Andes the second time towards Lima, he was going a bit too fast behind me, hit a pothole and fell off the bike. And as he got back up, a minivan behind him tried to brake, but because it was raining, it skidded, and Cho managed to jump out the way almost in time, got hit by the wing mirror and propelled out of the way, and then the bike got run over to the point that minivan had to reverse off it, and that's when it got snapped twice and bent. Cho was perfectly fine, got a bit winded, but otherwise he was perfectly fine, up and walking almost straight after, and got a bit of a health check from a clinic. But then Ed, I've never been more scared in my life. He was at my 10 o'clock, and I just saw this truck coming. There were two trucks, and the first one went very, very close, and I remember thinking, oh, that's close. And then I didn't even get to finish the sentence when the second one came and clipped him. And he just went flying off his bike in front of me, and I just dropped my bike and ran to him, and he just went so pale and clammy, and he was just groaning in so much pain. And I remember thinking, okay, he's making noise, he's conscious, so that's a good thing. But then because he was starting to go so pale, I was just praying that he wasn't bleeding out inside, and that was my worst thought, that he was just bleeding out internally. And then the truck didn't stop, and then all of these people stopped, but they were just crowded around us going, oh, what should we do? What's happening? And I was like, we need to call an ambulance. And they went, well, we don't know the number for the ambulance. And I was like, well, what? You don't have an emergency number? No, I don't. Like, well, what number do we call? And I was getting so frustrated because we were just on the side of the road for like a good 10 minutes at least. And I was just thinking he could be bleeding out internally, and we could be doing sort of irreparable damage to his insides that, you know, we can't come back from. But in the end, we went to a health centre, and then the health centre was shut, and I called the doctor, and he was like, yeah, I'm on my way. I'll be there. Like, oh yeah, he was like, yeah, I'll be on my way, and then hung up. And I was like, well, how long are you going to be? Did you want to just talk to me on the phone and not hang up? It was quite a scary experience thinking that I could lose him. And I never want to experience that again, and I would never wish that upon anyone. It's the most scary thing when the person that you love most in the world is in front of you in pain, and you don't know sort of what to do, what's going on, and just knowing that their life is at risk is just awful.
Yeah, that's a terrible deal. I know when I'm constantly looking for people to interview for the podcast, and when I'm out looking around the web, I run into stories of cyclists that have been killed.
Oh God.
And it's just a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank God I didn't get hit, but yeah, there were two experiences that just taught me just how dangerous it is to be cycling on the road, and you know how some people just don't have any regard for the safety of cyclists.
Well, how were the roads? I mean, was there enough of a shoulder that you can cycle on, or are you pretty much having to cycle in the traffic lane?
A lot of the places we had to cycle in the traffic lane. Some places had some really, really nice, big, sort of hard shoulders that we could cycle side by side and talk. But there were quite a few roads that it was just like single track type thing, and a lot of dangerous cliff edges that someone could have just accidentally clipped us and we would have fallen off the edge, fallen off the cliff, and some really disrespectful lorry drivers that just come so close to the point. There were about 3 times that I hit a lorry with my hand because it was so close, and I was so angry that it was so close. But there's just nothing you can really do about it except pray and make sure you wear a helmet.
How did you hold up health-wise over the trip? I know a lot of people, when they begin an adventure like this, they always worry about picking up some kind of an intestinal bug. And I would think with your eating situation, you're just increasing your odds. I mean, overall, how did you in particular hold up health-wise?
Thankfully, because I generally just eat anything I can put in my mouth on a very daily basis, and living in Mexico and traveling to Indonesia and loads of foreign places, my stomach is naturally very, very strong now. So over the course of the entire trip, I got diarrhea for 1 12-hour patch. Whereas my sisters that came out, especially Claire, she pretty much had diarrhea the whole time. Ed got diarrhea. A lot of people were quite sensitive stomach-wise, but I remember asking that specific question to Ed before I left, saying, what am I going to do if I get headaches all the time? And what am I going to do if I just feel sick and cold? And he went, well, when you're out there, your body's on a whole different scale. It doesn't pander to your health needs as much, Because in England and in these first world countries, we get a bit of a headache, and it's like, oh no, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to curl up on the sofa. I've got period pains. I'm going to get a hot water bottle and watch a film. When you're cycling and doing such an extreme thing, your body feels that pain and it goes, come on, don't be so silly. You've got other things to do. You need to like chug on. You've got things to do, and you become a lot stronger and a lot less tolerable of those little health niggles. And thankfully, I just didn't get very sick. A very funny story from the start of the expedition when we went through malaria country. I was taking malaria pills every day, and I marked in my book, malaria taken. And then it was only when my fiance came out that he went, you haven't taken a single malaria tablet. And I was like, well, yeah, I have. I've been taking them every day. I've taken one a day like I was supposed to. And he went, no, you haven't taken one. And then I showed him the malaria tablets I had been taking, and they were actually stomach antibiotics. So I was like, great, so I could have malaria, but I don't have a stomach problem, which is good. So that might be why I had such a strong stomach as well, because I was taking stomach antibiotics for like the first month instead of anti-malaria.
I understand that there's going to be some sort of a movie project to come out of this, because you were filming a lot of this along the way. What can you tell me about that?
I can tell you that I'm pretty sure I cycled South America twice from having to put the camera down, cycle, and then cycle back to pick it up like 3 times a day. So I'm pretty sure I ended up cycling about 10,000 kilometers, not 7. At the moment, the trailer's being cut, or the trailer has been cut, and it's in front of, I think, BBC Two have now been approached, but it's in front of Discovery, Sky, Channel 5, a lot of English broadcasters, and hopefully some international, but we'll see where it goes. I hope there's some really good footage in there and we can make a really interesting documentary about how it feels to be living without money and the lives of other people that are truly in that predicament. It should be a really, really good video. I've seen the teaser trailer and it's really good. Obviously, I'm going to say that because it's me, but it's I think it's very good.
Is the trailer available online?
No, it's all quite private because it's being pitched to channels and stuff. So I haven't been able to publicly broadcast it yet.
So what was your experience in filmmaking? Did you have to get any sort of a tutorial before you left?
I've got a production company, Cyclists Productions, that I went to see them, and they gave me a bit of a lowdown of the best ways to film. And we watched one of my fiance's programs, and he just pointed out different camera angles and to make sure I get certain shots. But otherwise, I think being a kid of such a young generation, it's sort of natural to me to film so much and to film every little bit. But other than that little talk and run through I had with Cyclists, it was all pretty much figure it out as I go along.
How did you find that your equipment held up in the conditions down there?
The first camera got run over in Cho's accident. It got smushed. The second one, the sound went. And then the third one, it was in the last 3 days, like 3 days before I finished, it fell out of my basket and hit the floor and cracked the screen. So I guess the sound went because of the climate damage, but the other two were very people-induced accidents. Poor little things.
Tell me a little bit more about Operation South America and why you're supporting them.
I'd love to. Operation South America, the 2 people running it, it's a married couple called, the chap is called Osvaldo and the lady's called Maria. And they have 2 sons, and their first son at the age of 9 got diagnosed with this rare strain of leukemia. And because they didn't really have enough money and the medicine out in South America wasn't evolved enough to deal with that strain, that he unfortunately died at the age of 9. So this couple left Asuncion and they went down to this little village, and they met an Englishman called Phil Granger. And they conjured up this idea to help those less fortunate and to help young children that need help. So they set up this lovely organization called Operation South America to look after young girls that are in need of a home, that are in need of shelter and food, and sort of to help them to learn and be educated. So that's been running for quite a while now. And at current, they have 21 young girls living there, and they need more help and support from volunteers to go down there to help look after these girls, because they don't feel like they can take on any more children, because then they wouldn't be able to give them the one-to-one attention that they need to feel special and to be educated properly and to be taught what they're worth. And it's a wonderful organization that doesn't just give the food and shelter to these girls. The organization teaches them that just because they're from a poor background doesn't mean that that's where they have to stay their entire life, that they can do anything that they want to and be educated in whatever subject that they want to. So if anybody out there wants to go down and volunteer and help look after these girls and donate money towards the food and the electricity bills, that would be incredible. But I remember being in the garden and playing with them and playing chase and just running around and thinking that this is almost just like an after-school club because everyone's so happy and lovely. And it was only when the child defense lawyer drove into the drive and I saw the sign on the side of the car that I went, oh, yeah, that's not an after-school club, is it? It's actually, there's a reason for all of these girls being here. And two of the girls stood up and said, excuse me, we have to go inside now to speak to our lawyer. And I was like, oh, okay. And unfortunately now the married couple that are there looking after these girls, their second son has now got leukemia, and he's been fighting leukemia off for the past year. So they haven't had a very good run of luck with their own children.
Laura, what's your biggest takeaway from the adventure?
My biggest takeaway, that it's very hard to live without money, and it's very, very hard to live without the knowledge of when food and shelter is going to come. It can be a very dark place when you don't know when those things are coming. Because from Lima, I vowed not to touch money at all, to not even accepting donations or accepting bits of change or anything. Because from Manta in Ecuador to Lima, we were accepting if people wanted to give us $1 or $2 or, a little bit of money, we would accept it. And thankfully we had to use that to fix the bike in Lima. We had to fix it to be welded back together. But then from Lima, I vowed not to touch money at all. It's very scary just knowing you can't pay your way out of anything, or you can't buy anything. So the thing I took away from it is to not judge people at all when you see them, because I think to a lot of people out there, they could have just seen a white person on a bike and they would just presume that they were doing a cycling tour on a gap year. But it was only when they started talking to me that they realized what I was going through was actually something a bit bigger. So definitely not to prejudge people and assume you know what they're going through or assume you know their story, and to smile at people, because I know in Paraguay when people really started smiling and waving and giving me thumbs up, it just made me so happy. And before Paraguay, I didn't really have that. People would toot for me to get out of the way, or the odd person may have smiled, but in Paraguay, people were really, really smiley and wavy and happy. And it's so joyful to be greeted with that. I learned just how important it is to smile at strangers.
If you had to do it all over again, what's something that you would do differently?
Nothing. I don't regret one single thing. I wouldn't change any of the experiences at all in the world, because the lessons that I learned were from all of the mistakes that I made, and all of the joyous moments were because I'd made a good decision, or I'd followed a gut. Everything led to me learning something or experiencing something. So I wouldn't change anything. Even me taking too much weight out and me taking a trailer out, I wouldn't do that again if I were to do another experience. But because I took it out, I had loads of things to give people, and I learned just how important it is to not take a trailer, and just how important it is to take as little equipment as possible, because cycling without weight is so much more enjoyable. So I learned something from everything.
What about the adventure are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of raising money for this charity and raising awareness. So I'm really praying that they get an influx of loads of people wanting to go down and volunteer and help them and teach English down there or to teach IT or something. But I'm very proud to be working with this organisation.
Do you happen to know their website?
Yeah, it's literally www.operationsouthamerica.org, I think. So if you just type Operation South America in Google, it'll come up, operationsouthamerica.org.
Laura, what's next for you?
Getting married. I get married in about 5 weeks. So it's just been full-on wedding planning since we've got back. Trying to plan a wedding from South America when you're traveling without any money is quite difficult. So yeah, we get married in about 5 weeks. So that's the next biggest thing. But at the start of November, I'm going out to a country to try and walk a certain section. But everyone will just have to follow my social media to find out because I'm not giving anything away.
How can people contact you if they want to learn more?
On my website, there's a contact me page. So they can just send me a little email via my website and I'll get it and respond. Or write on my photos or Twitter.
Laura Bingham, congratulations on your engagement and continued success in your adventures. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Recorded July 29th, 2016. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.